Anybody who comes in, we'll welcome them in mid-talk, Birgitta. So I'm just going to keep this very brief because we're all here to hear Birgitta and say that it is my privilege, and I know you need me to talk here so you can hear me, right? It is my privilege and honor to welcome Birgitta to share with us about her new book, The Dear Folks at Home. For anyone who has not had an opportunity to read a chapter for tonight's meeting, I think you will be delighted by the book. It's really, as Birgitta will tell you, there's no need to read it in order. You can read it out of order, in any order, whatever part interests you. And it's a wonderful story. And with that, I will hand the floor over to Birgitta. And welcome, Birgitta. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, all of you, for being here today. The presentation I will make, can you all hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I've called my presentation Gutsy Women and the Light of Green, and I will explain, of course, what I mean by those words. So I'll just start, and I will read everything to be in order. Much in life is not planned, but happens because it's meant to be. This evening, I'll tell you bits of a story about two women who grew up in Victorian times. Sarah, born in 1858, and Roxy in 1868, whose personalities were completely different, but who still became friends as close as sisters. They wore long dresses when they played tennis or hiked in the woods, and would have been very cold in the winter nights when the fires were out if they didn't sleep almost fully dressed under quilts that they themselves had made. Sarah and Roxy were Victorian girls with good manners. They were smart, caring, and gutsy women, ready for fun and for new knowledge in their lives. Mostly, they lived far apart from each other, but in their regular, very many letters, they shared both joy and inconsolable grief. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll just speak on the same level. Sarah Elizabeth Pray and Roxana Eleanor Lord, always called Roxy by her family, were both born in Great Falls, Somersworth. But Roxy grew up across the river in Berwick, and they didn't know each other until in 1894, when they were in their 20s and 30s. That they met at all happened thanks to two extraordinary so-called coincidences, but one can assume these meetings were meant to be. First, about Sarah. One day in 1859, Lorenzo Pray, her father, happened to run into an old schoolmate on a street in Great Falls. And they stopped to chat, glad to see each other. Charlie had moved to East Siberia for the fur trade, whereas Lorenzo had remained at home on Echo Hill, where he farmed in Somersworth. He was also a proud father of a little girl with sparkling blue eyes. Would Charlie perhaps like to meet his wife, Harriet, and their daughter? Unfortunately, Charlie said he was at home only briefly and could not come for a visit that day, but he promised to drop by when he was next in town. Can you all still hear me? I cannot see you right now.
Yes.
Okay. So he explained that he could not come that day, but he promised to drop by when he was next in town. And he did drop by. It just took a while. 20 years later, he was again in Great Falls. And this time he met Lorenzo's family. He and Sarah fell in love, and they married in 1880. Roxy's love story was also began with some unlikely twists and turns. Her parents, George and Eunice Lord, decided to send their inquisitive elder daughter to study at Colby Academy, a boarding school in New London, in New Hampshire. And in September 1882, off she went by train to Andover, then by coach to the school. This 13-year-old girl enjoyed everything at Colby: the books and the classes, the town and the landscape, her new friends, and the downtown candy store. Until the following year, when mother and father had to make her an NG, a non-graduate. Father George owned much land, but not always much cash. And in bitter disappointment, Roxy had to return to Berwick and enter Sullivan High for fall 1883. But all of a sudden, kind fate stepped in to help Roxy too. As she wrote later, quote, "A school row over the legal pronunciation of Arkansas had split the town up. And this irritated her so much that for spring term 1884, she skipped away from Sullivan over the bridge and into Great Falls High. There, on January 1, 1884, she saw him, tall, handsome Ted Pray, sauntering into the room with a bunch of other boys, and I think you can imagine what they looked like. To the end of her life, Roxy was convinced that had she not left Colby, she would never have met Ted, Sarah's brother. They married in 1894 and were given an extraordinary opportunity to see the world. Sarah and Charlie invited them to live in their home, Dom Smith, in Vladivostok, Russia's main port on the Pacific, where Ted would work in Sarah's American store. Now, I cannot see you again, and Jeremy, is that all right? Can I still keep just talking?
You certainly can. I can maybe adjust things so that you, if you would like to be able to see the audience while you're talking.
I want to see all of them all the time. So I can continue now then?
Yes.
Okay. A bridge of connection, a bridge of connections. The long journey to Russia began on May 7, 1894, and already on the train from Dover, Roxy started writing to her dear folks at home. She wanted to build a bridge of letters that would regularly connect her old family, parents, sister Clara, Auntie Anna, and foster brother William McHugh, with her and her new family. Clara became the faithful and trustworthy overseer in charge of the more than 1,000 letters that Roxy would send to their post office box. Clara read them to the family. The parents were blind, and to keep the letters safe, she collected most of them in the attic of Elm Wold, as Roxy called the old Lord homestead. These letters and those folks have continued to build connections across land, oceans, and other borders. I'm not related to any of the Lords or Prays, but it is thanks to them and all the letters that you in Berwick and I are now meeting. Fate decided to step in again as if out of the blue. Two university presidents, Viktor Gadshakov of Far Eastern State University in Vladivostok, and Sam Smith of Washington State, where I worked, had opened an exchange program between our students, faculty, and administrators. And in the summer of 1994, a group of our Russian colleagues were at WSU to discuss shared environmental issues. After one of those sessions, Peter Bravko, a geographer whom I knew from before, asked if I could mail a letter for him. Someone in Vladivostok had asked his help. There was no envelope, but a name and address headed the text. Of course, I agreed, translated the letter, and sent it off. 3 days later, a woman I didn't know, Patricia Silver, phoned me, glad to have heard from her Russian friends and very excited to talk for almost 2 hours on the phone about Vladivostok. Her grandmother had lived there for 3.5 decades, and Pat hoped to write a book about her granny's letters. So, with this special help, even by a winged messenger, Dr. Bravko, this was how Pat Silver and her granny, the remarkable Eleanor Lord Pray, turned up in my life. Now back to glimpses of Sarah and Roxy. These were strong women, each in her own distinct way. Still young when traveling to Vladivostok, Roxy had not been groomed for society, as she wrote to her daughter, Dorothy. As far, quote, as far as social training was concerned, I had precious little. But Sarah and Charlie knew the norms of both New England and Vladivostok and became Roxy and Ted's guides. She learned how to dress for elegant balls on the Imperial Russian Navy's cruisers and to join the Russians singing at parties. Everything was fun. Sarah and Roxy seemed unlikely best friends. The elder, mild-mannered, calm and non-judgmental. The younger, spontaneous, easily impatient, and by her own words, too self-assured and opinionated. But both were intelligent, quick thinkers, well-informed about history and politics, and devoted readers as well as tailors. And they shared deep love for, as Sarah wrote to Roxy, dear old New England. One morning in Roxy's first Vladivostok spring, in the harbor below Dom Smith where they lived, she caught sight of a ship with an American flag and hurried to the piano to play, I think you know what, the Star-Spangled Banner. Then she stayed by the window, admiring this three-masted schooner for most of the day. In a letter home, Sarah wrote, "We are a decided contrast, for I always take everything so calmly and quietly, and she is all excitability and enthusiasm. She's a thorough child when anything pleases her, and it is a regular pleasure to see her enjoy things." Roxy admired the expansion of mind and knowledge that travels can give. Her curiosity was rewarded with discovery, her pluck gilded with adventure. Roxy's character was already tuned this way, but the very exhilaration of living in the Russian wild East confirmed it. Consider, for instance, her prowess as a horsewoman. Sarah and Charlie's best friends had a country house east of Vladivostok where Roxy could go riding. There was no side saddle for women there, which worried absolutely nobody among these Victorians, and Roxy gleefully accepted the slight challenge. Riding astride was not hard, but her skirt, she wrote, was rather in the way in mounting and dismounting. As the other women meandered sedately along on their horses, this 19th century lady preferred to fly along the trails, and she chose a young man as her riding partner, quote, "For then we rode like demons, and how I did enjoy it." Not many Victorian limitations could stop Roxy's desire to move and to act. The piazza and the Old East parlor. Central in Roxy's memories of home was the small porch, the piazza, on the north side of Elm Wold. One day in 1875, when she was 6 or 7, she was sitting on the piazza, observing the newly built Hersom house across the street, where the Hersom family were moving in. With full attention, she saw the teamsters going back and forth delivering furniture and household things. Decades later, she wrote, "What impressed me most of all was that on one trip, one of Mr. Hersum's men sat on the front seat holding a huge pile of white dinner plates, which I expected to break at any minute. This girl liked good stories and very likely hoped to see the porcelain dance away from the truck and create a fantastic, exquisite noise. That did not happen, but many decades later, she recalled the scene as precisely as if it were a black and white clip from the reel of a silent movie." Indoors, the old East parlor was the Lord's living room, where evenings the family gathered by the fireplace, at the fireplace, sang and read together, discussed news and shared stories and jokes, all of which Roxy missed forever. Auntie Anna wrote to her regularly, always straight from the heart and with a blend of pep and sincerity that her niece was charmed by. This time, Auntie highlighted those evenings so as to confirm that everyone was well and to create a whiff of nostalgia. She asked if Roxy didn't long, quote, "to sit down by the fireplace and hear the fun go on." Then she added the temptation. "That fireplace is just as jolly as ever. We sit around it and have a good time and sharpen our wits up." One can smile at Auntie's story and at the same time realize how much she missed her Roxy. The morning of May 7, 1894, just before the Smiths and Pray's long journey, Roxy and her father sat in the same room in the old East parlor and talked. She and Ted were to be absent from home for 5 years, and everyone was in a mood of sorrow, including Roxy's clever and affectionate doggie, McNeil, and the grand old lady, Kitty Cat Tiny. If you have seen difficult partings, you can imagine this one. McNeil sits on the floor, nudging and leaning as near his mistress as he can get, while Tiny sprawls on her lap. Looking out through the window, father and daughter chat about this and that, painfully aware of their imminent farewell and fearing that they will never see each other again. So there they are, sharing a few precious moments while waiting for a hack to drive them to the station in Somersworth. By complex changes in these lives, the Prays' 5 years away from home became a heart-rending 8, and Roxy and her father would never see each other again. Deep care with few words. Unlike Roxy, Sarah did not write letters about historical events or lots of funny moments. Her own hundreds of letters are direct and comforting, but with few words. In fact, it was her very being, how she lived her life, that inspired others. Growing up at a farm had given her all kinds of practical knowledge. She knew how to repair furniture and to wallpaper rooms. She made soap for floors as well as for laundry, grew fruit and berries for wonderful jam, could cook all meals imaginable, and made her sitting room upstairs in Dom Smith a cozy corner for friends. And we'll get back to that room. She was also a perfect caregiver for those in grief. This ability she had to apply to herself when, without forewarning, Charlie suddenly died from a heart attack on Friday, May the 13th, 1898. That morning, Sarah found her husband who had fallen outside their home. Sarah was 39 years old. With aching wisdom, she reflected that together they had been given quote, 18 years of such happiness as few people experience, quote. She vowed to thank God for that and try not to cry out. Charlie's embalmed body was first buried in Vladivostok at the Lutheran cemetery, and the following year Sarah brought him back to Somersworth and Forest Glade Cemetery, where they all are now. Peace came to Sarah after this. Despite her far-reaching, energetic work as a businesswoman and organizer, she considered herself phlegmatic, explaining that her reaction even to grief tended to be calm, quote, at least outwardly, however much I may feel inside. Tolerance was a trait of Sarah's character. When we recognize her responsibility both for others and for her own integrity, her steady behavior was an equally pragmatic approach to difficulties, as Roxy's vibrant, as she called them, elastic spirits. They reacted differently to sorrow, but the outcome was the same. They lived through it, coped with it, and survived. With simple words of caring, Sarah also gave Roxy some life-affirming advice in a discussion so silly that one wonders why they had kept it going in several letters back and forth. Somehow, they got into a little debate about women's looks. Did Roxy perhaps look Russian or perhaps French? When Sarah decided enough is enough and steered this useless quest into a useful plan, she wrote, never mind how you look, as long as you can be of assistance to anyone. As a child, Rox had probably heard similar words, but this time she took them to heart and began seriously to assist others. For several years in Vladivostok, she had served tea and sewn trinkets to sell at philanthropic fundraising events. But the 3 wars that befell Russia broadened her work significantly. Her life's achievement became not only writing all those long historic letters, but also sewing and organizing help on a large scale for both the Russian and the American Red Cross. Over and over again, she witnessed mankind's terrifying repetitions of war. The Russo-Japanese War, 1904-5, the First World War, 1914-18, the Russian Civil War, 1917-22. In this chaos, she found some ways to alleviate the suffering of thousands of women, children, and men whose ordinary lives had been destroyed by that violence. As widows, both Sarah and Roxy had to figure out their new steps without the support of close relatives. Ted died in 1923 of blood poisoning when he was 55 years old only, and Roxy's safe and jolly life was broken apart. Her Baptist faith was solid. She sensed God's direct influence day by day, but half a year after Ted died, she wrote to Sarah in deep despondency. Quote, with the evenings lengthening, I feel more and more what I have lost. I haven't yet lost my courage, though sometimes it seems as if it were oozing away. God has helped me so far, and I'll try to have faith for the future. With a tad of hope, she began to say that losing her husband was the worst that could happen, and so there was nothing else to fear. She had elastic spirits. Ted had been her partner and mentor, and a loving man who had given Roxy numerous memories of joy. One of the fondest occurred in the fall of 1921, when she returned to Vladivostok after visiting their daughter Dorothy at her boarding school in Shanghai, where Sarah also lived. Ted met Roxy on the pier in Vladivostok, and years later she wrote, "The best memory of that whole trip was the welcome home and Ted's dear voice as he said, 'Hello, old lady.' His cheeks as red as the sleet could make them, and such a happy smile in his eyes. It was a mere moment, but oh, so sweet." Get soon to two pieces of music that I will first introduce. And this part of my presentation I call Music That Heals. The first one is Let the Lower Lights Be Burning by American composer and gospel singer Philip Paul Bliss. It is a hymn. One of Roxy's favorite hymns was Let the Lower Lights Be Burning. Its story follows an urgent request, an invocation in the Gospel of Luke. Keep your lamps burning. The hymn's simple but powerful checklist of human goodness and decency argues that God looks after the heavenly light so that we on earth can participate in the light and teamwork of life, helping others in their struggles. The refrain says, "Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save." Roxy understood the rolling waters as an image of despair and seeking light as a hope for inner peace. We are all sailors on the sea of life, where beacons of light can offer comfort and insights in the dark. Roxy had special memories of this hymn. The first at about 10 years old, when her parents had taken the family for a few days to the York beaches in Maine. The evening was turning into night, and quote, "We were staying in a tiny cottage close to the shore." I think many of you perhaps have been there. You can imagine this. Father, mother, auntie, my sister, and I, with the moon shining over the ocean to where Boone Island light shone dimly many miles away. Moved by this nighttime sky of light, Mother Eunice began to sing, "Let the lower lights be burning," and Roxy found this hymn, quote, "so appropriate that I never forgot it." Jeremy, now we can listen to it.
Our Father's mercy
Sing
from
along
his
if you want.
lighthouse evermore. But to us he gives the keeping of the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the way. Some poor fainting, struggling seamen, you may rescue, you may save. Dark the night, our sin has settled, loud the angry billows roar. Eager eyes are watching, longing for the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the way. Some poor fainting, struggling seamen, you may rescue, you may save. Trim your feeble lamp, my brother. Some poor sailor, tempest tossed, trying now to make the harbor in the darkness may be lost. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor fainting, struggling seaman you may rescue, you may save.
In Vladivostok, more than 4 decades later, this is what she heard on the beach when she was only 10. Roxy again experienced such glimpses of light, that light that breaks through darkness. This was in February 1922, during the Allied intervention in the Russian Civil War, when the USS Albany was moored in the city's central bay of the Golden Horn. From Dawn Smith, Roxy could see the ships in the harbor, and she often walked down there to attend Sunday service on the Albany and sing the hymns the sailors selected. At dawn this particular day, a funeral was first held for a Marine who had died of pneumonia. And Roxy noticed that the stars, quote, the stars were still shining, even while our boys, the sailors, were choosing the hymns. And then, to honor their missing seaman, they had actually picked "Let the Lower Lights Be Burning." For Roxy, who had just admired the shining stars and was then singing and hearing this hymn, it was so moving that, as she wrote at once later that day, she couldn't keep the tears back. Somehow, these stars over the Pacific Ocean in the 1920s had joined the lighthouse and moon over the Atlantic in the 1870s, and the York beaches of her past had reached out to the Golden Horn in her Russian present. I'll now introduce the second piece of music that I also love. It is in Russian, but I hope that you will hear the melody and I will outline what goes on in the story. They are by Russian poet Mikhail Lermontov and composer Anton Rubinstein. I have named this presentation "Gutsy Women and the Light of Green" for Sarah and Roxy, and for two of Roxy's favorite images of encouragement: the light that breaks through darkness and the light of green. She loved hiking in forests, enjoyed being near trees and seeing hills and valleys. In July 1902, when Ted and Roxy were in New England, they went by train to Rangeley Lake for a weekend with Ted's and Sarah's brother Moses and his wife Mildred. Roxy was elated, and I quote, "It is the most beautiful country," and she meant Maine and New England, "I have yet seen, and thank God it is my own. Words cannot describe the mountains, the sunset sky, and the delicate shades of green against the huge flanks of the mountains covered with a darker evergreen." Roxy became very fond of Russian music, especially Mountain Heights, which she declared, quote, "the grandest thing I ever heard in my life, and I'm never tired of playing it over." Mountain Heights adds music to the only eight short lines of Lermontov's poem that illustrates nature during a hillside walk. These are the 8 lines. Mountain heights, asleep in nighttime dark, quiet dales, abrim with freshened haze. No dust stirs on the road, no leaves a tremble. Just wait a while, you too will rest. Many readers of this poem might find this a boring story, but Roxy, an experienced reader, grasped its depth and nuances at once. Lermontov's words, enhanced and understood through the magic of Rubinstein's melody, kept her spellbound, both directly and between the lines. She thought about what it looked like and how it would feel to be in a place like that. Anton Rubinstein used tones and rhythm to interpret the walker's actions and feelings, carefully keeping in mind each line of the poem. He wrote 2 different melodies for the same words, but the changing melody shows the walker's changing reactions to the landscape. In the first melody, he moves along casually, looking around. His mood is calm. The music is in a major key. He observes the road when a slight minor key suggests some unease, perhaps a sad memory, but it does not stay. Instead, the second melody begins with an exuberant vibration of tones, and one can imagine him in the fresh air, admiring the views and the trees so majestic that his attention soars toward the sky. In Rubinstein's Mountain Heights, the walker is comforted by the green landscape and finds tranquility. Let's listen, Jeremy, to Mountain Heights.
Very good.
Okay. So I'll continue the story.
Yes, absolutely.
From the train going east, when the Prays and the Smiths went to Vladivostok, Eleanor Pray, and I'm going to call her Eleanor towards the end here, had seen the Rocky Mountains and the Cascades in Washington, and she admired what Lermontov and Rubinstein had presented, mountains on a calm evening in the waning light, a walk in the woods with grass and earth that one can almost touch. With its blend of major and minor keys, the melody reflects the ups and downs of life, as well as the hope of peaceful moments. By the fall of 1901, at age 32, Eleanor had lost her 3 closest relatives, Mammy, her grandma, her beloved cousin Arthur, and her father. Then in 1918 and 23, her mother and Ted. To Eleanor, both music and forest walks were forms of meditation, steps sometimes to soften grief. Quote, "There is real rest for head and nerves in the woods. An afternoon in December 1929 confirmed the serenity that mountain heights could create. Eleanor was at home in Dawn Smith with friends, and although they had not planned anything special, the setting itself created it. After tiffin, as they call lunch, they were having coffee in Sarah's cozy sitting room. We're back in that room upstairs. Christmas was near, and to celebrate the day, Eleanor brought out a few records, of course, including Mountain Heights. As she told Sarah in her letter that night, the music along with the memories of this room revived, quote, the times that were, but are not. That dear room with its polished floor, the music one has heard there, times without number. It seemed as if you, Sarah, and Ted must be here, and that Dorothy would come flying in as a little girl in a white dress with a blue sash. Those times were no more. Sarah and Dorothy now lived far away, and Ted had left them years ago. But Eleanor had no doubt about this. The soothing music remained, and her favorite pieces could heal the ills that cannot be cured. I have some lines with acknowledgements and then one final small paragraph. I am so glad to be with you in the Berwick Historical Society today, with special thanks to Jeremy for inviting me. For my book, The Dear Folks at Home, I've had the great luck to read documents from 4 major archives, 2 public, the one at the Library of Congress and the Arseniev Museum of History in Vladivostok. Also 2 private ones, the family archives of Marjorie Smith here in Maine and of Patricia Silver in Florida. The first book about Eleanor Pray, Letters from Vladivostok, which was first published in 2008, returned parts of Vladivostok's forgotten history to its residents. And for this achievement, the city honored her and her country on 4th of July, 2014, exactly 10 years ago, with an elegant bronze statue on Main Street. In and around Berwick, my work has been helped with extraordinary kindness and knowledge by, among others, Ross and Amy Bachelder, Pat and Paul Boisvert, Robert Brunel, Karen Egger, Jane Fletcher, Jenny Holmes, Loris Jackson, Frank Kennedy, Norma Kime, Nelson Laurie, Eric Momsen, George Poulin, Mark Sippel, Marjorie Smith Joyce, and Ron Vignew, Don Young, and Joanne St. Pierre. Also Judy Curry, Gillian Graham, and Ralph Morang. And Lord and Pray family descendants Marion and William McHugh, Kathleen Meese, Sophie Wadsworth, and Jeff Pray. In her blurb for the Dear Folks at Home, Lisa Canino named Sarah and Roxy the gutsy women. And she, along with all these good friends and colleagues, have generously given me much inspiration. Almost everything in this presentation is based on memories from the Dear Folks at Home. To finish, I will read to you the first little paragraph in a section called Memories Do Not Die. Memories do not really die. Time itself is their bridge to us today. With the elegance of butterflies, they flutter by, carrying the joys and sorrows of long ago moments. But if at that precise time we are not ready to recognize them, they will hide again in their usual places. Photos and diaries, letters, objects, and the forgotten lore of our lives. We can recognize their presence only when connecting our now with their then. That is how we can find the live picture among the intangible pieces. When we look back, These linkages of fate are often hard to believe, and much will make no sense. But they do appear, and listening can reveal what was embedded in oblivion. Even odd memories can build perfect bridges to connect us today with those who came before. May your best memories support you.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I wonder if any of you had a hard time following something of this. Of course, there are many details that I myself know for many years. It may have been mostly new to you. Tell me if something needs to be clarified, or if you liked something particularly. I would like to hear a bit from you how you related to these old folks from when were they born? 160 years ago. Even though they had long dresses, could we connect with them? Could you hear the kinds of people they were? I would like to hear something from you. I've talked a long time, now it's your turn.
Anyone in the room have anything that they'd like to share with Birgitta about the presentation, or are you also able to take questions as well, Birgitta?
Of course. This is not a school group. Think of it as people sitting together at a cafe, and we want to talk. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, in the back.
A little bit out in left field, but I've long wondered why it took the Japanese in Shanghai to intern the Prays and Sarah Smith. After all, they had an active and well-informed secret police. I know Shanghai was a large and wild city, but it's a long time to intern people that were considered enemies. So, as I say, out in left field.
I believe if were you able to hear that, or would you like me to?
No, I couldn't hear.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the question is why did the Japanese in Shanghai inter the Prays for such a long time?
No. Why did it take them so long?
Why did it take them so long to decide to inter the Prays in Shanghai?
I don't understand the question. Why are we talking about the Japanese?
Are you sure you don't? I think it's a good question. He's wondering why, when the Prays were interred in Shanghai, why it took so long to decide for the Japanese to decide to inter them.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about that. I know that the Japanese invaded and caused terrible destruction. And in fact, Eleanor by then had moved. The story we heard at the very end, when she was with friends listening one more time to Mountain Heights, was almost exactly a year before she had to leave Russia. And she moved to her daughter in Shanghai. And when the United States was attacked, the Japanese who were in power in Shanghai and many parts of that country forced Eleanor and her family, including the ashes of Sarah. Sarah had died in 1942. And this was then the next year after the attack here. And they had to be in a camp for almost a year. And they eventually were part of an exchange of people in two ships in India. One of them was the Swedish one, the Gripsholm, that took Eleanor and her family back to the United States, to New Jersey. concerning what you precisely asked, I do not know. I have not read Japanese history. I do not know that.
Other questions? Thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Birgitta Laurie Jackson. And I enjoyed your book very much, especially the acknowledgments with the coincidences that made everything possible. And then besides that, what was the exact meaning of elm wool?
Okay, I'll take the simple one first. Elmwold. Elm, of course, is the tree. They had a lot of trees around the Lord homestead. And I actually have a bowl made from one of them because they got a terrible illness, so many of them had to be cut down. But Eleanor loved elms, and wold is more a British word. I tried to explain some of the name of the house in the beginning of one of the chapters, and what she liked was partly that she was of English background. She was the 8th generation after Nathan Lord Senior came to this area, and she held on to a lot of English words. A wold is a hill with trees and grass. I think we would often call it a pasture. And there are 2 very famous ones in England, the Cotswolds near Wales, and up near Scotland, the York Wolds. But yeah, that's it. Now, the other question about coincidences, there is a Russian word that means fate or destiny, sudba, and it's something so simple you can all say it, sudba. It's not a difficult word, and one cannot meet a lot of Russians and be friends with them before the word comes up. And they use it to explain this thing that things can happen because they're meant to happen. Coincidence, Russians do not believe in coincidences. Something was made, was meant to be. And Laurie, did you mention that you have noticed that, or what made you ask that question?
I had noticed it and then I couldn't go back and find it.
Oh, where it is in the book, you mean? Or you mean something in the book?
Yes, you gave the definition in the book. And then,
Well, that's, I think, in the first chapter on the first page is the explanation. First chapter, another Russia, first page.
I enjoyed the book very much. It was Berwick in the era my grandmother grew up in.
Wow. Wow. I think we live with these kinds of things around us. Any other comments or questions?
Anyone on the Zoom call have questions? Anyone who's over their computer?
Well, you can write to me, of course. Jeremy, you can give my address, my email address later.
Yes.
But I can ask you some questions also. Claire, did you have your hand up? Did you want to ask something?
Yes, just 2 little details. I'll write to you at length about the.
I want to explain. Claire is one of my old dear friends and colleagues from WSU. Okay.
Yes, and I'm speaking to you from Victoria, British Columbia. So you have an international audience here in Canada. No, and I will have things to say to you and email. Birgitta, but I just wanted to ask 2 little detail questions. Does the Lutheran cemetery still exist in Vladivostok?
Not in Vladivostok, no.
When did it disappear? Did they?
It's a sad and incomplete story. they decided that with the revolution, the year of two revolutions, 1917 in Russia, within about a decade, they took down all churches. Some churches were destroyed, others were made into cinemas and houses and schools and so on. Those that were still used, of course, still look beautiful. They have been renovated now. But in the case of the very large cemetery that was right in the middle of what is now the center of the city, they decided to make it into a park. And many of the bodies, many of the graves are probably still there under grass and trees and so on. But many were also taken away. Many of the coffins were moved to other cemeteries. They made some new cemeteries at that time. But the whole thing is not clear. And so it's one of these iffy things that one often avoids thinking about.
Birgitta, can you hear me? Bill McHugh?
Yes, hey, hello.
I'm curious, sad, I guess this is kind of sad, actually, but I assume that you're not able to go back to Vladivostok now, that it's completely impossible.
Right now I cannot because of the sanctions. And in fact, I'll tell you a little story about that. It's not on the Russian side, primarily. I have very many friends, and we can talk by email or WhatsApp, that kind of thing. I have tried to phone, regular phone, that doesn't go through. But I did send a couple of years ago when the COVID was going on, I just sent a little letter to a friend. Her name is Irina, a dear friend. We have worked together also. And I knew that she liked the Belgian old-fashioned, very old and beautiful paintings about people in a village skating on ice in the village pond in the winter. And I had such a one. I wrote to her a few things in Russian, and I sent it off from here, from the United States in probably, I think it was in November, so that she would get it by New Year's. We corresponded at that time regularly, and I didn't hear from her. I thought probably by the end of January she would say something about this card, because it was unusual that we sent real letters, and nothing happened. And then in March, I received it back. It had never been opened. It was stamped all over the front and all over the back, not by Russian stamps, but by our stamps. And it was because of sanctions. I was so angry that I wrote to the post office general, a personal letter, not a big protest, but I just said, what is going on and why can I not send an ordinary kind letter to kind people? This was during, this happened not during the COVID, but during the war. And I had a proper letter back, not one of those that are simply printed and sent off, but rather printed and sent off beginning and end, but in the middle it was quite personal to me, not written by the post office general himself, but I think he had said to a secretary to tell me these things, namely that there was no way that the United States post office could send anything to Russia at this time. And that has continued and is getting worse.
Well, that's too bad, but it's also a terrible situation, as you know.
Yes, yes. And in fact, the sanctions, we hear a lot about the sanctions perhaps growing from here and from other countries, of course, in Europe and other parts. Much of that hurts the ordinary folks, people who are ordinary teachers, doctors, work in a store, any ordinary group. They are the ones that are being hurt because they cannot buy what normally would be there. For example, another friend has had lung cancer, perhaps almost 10 years ago now, and she had told me at some point that she was getting a very good medication. I forget if it was from the United States or from France, but it was sold in Russia, and she could buy it with Russian rubles there. And so she had used that. Her doctor had said, this is the one you should use. And with the sanctions, all of that ended. So she now has to use whatever medication they have there. It's not that they don't have medications, but I guess she felt that this perhaps was more safe or more or better. But that ended also. And in fact, many of the chocolates from Switzerland and so on, France, they are not available right now. But I believe, of course, it will end and become the usual ordinary folks' life there. Bill, did I answer somewhat?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question to all of you. Think about, why would I have wanted to mention in what I read to you and what I've written that Sarah had sparkling blue eyes? It's true that she did. Eleanor wrote about that. But why would I bother to include it, do you think? What does that mean to you, that someone has sparkling blue eyes? And you know already what I think about Sarah. I think Sarah has always been too little discussed. Without Sarah, Eleanor could not have got her statue. That's how it is. These are the connections. Sarah and Charlie made it work that Eleanor and Ted could come. And I think Eleanor was much more happy about that than Ted. He came because he loved her truly. So why would I want to include the blue eyes about Sarah? What does blue eyes mean to you? I asked my husband, and he tried to talk around it. I have brown eyes. My husband has beautiful blue eyes. What does it mean? Of course, it's not everybody. There are mean people with blue eyes too. Kindness, sweetness. Sarah, you heard what I think about Sarah. Her character was extraordinary, so kind and faithful, and they knew each other until Sarah died. And in fact, in the book, I have one page at the end of chapter 15, which is about Sarah. And it's about how she died. She had cancer, also breast cancer, and she died in 1942. And then I show why I admired her so much. It's just one page. It's called, now I forget what the name is of well, it doesn't matter what it's called. It's the last page of chapter 15.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions that they'd like to share?
Couldn't
I
hear.
would just, go ahead.
Tell me. Jeremy, I couldn't hear.
I think somebody was going to jump in on the Zoom call with a question.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
Well, I was just going to make a comment that as you know, I've been doing the family research and genealogy and connecting the dots and dates and names and stuff, but hearing the stories of the people is really something special. So I just want to thank you for that. It's really it's really great. I appreciate it. So it gives a glimpse into the lives, and every time I hear a different description of like how they met or anything like that, it's really fantastic. So
You're very kind to say that. It took a long time to write all these books, especially this one. And towards the end, I was exhausted.
I'm sure.
Couldn't stop. And in fact, at times I made a joke about how I wish the dear folks would go home, not the dear folks at home, because I wanted my home to be open to me. They had taken over my home, Bill. And but that, of course, has not stopped me. I've worked about 30 years on various aspects, and I'm particularly happy about this book and also the first one, the letters from Vladivostok. because it becomes, you are part of that family. I feel as if in some ways I have become part of the family, and you and your sister have made it so wonderful, actually, for me to know that I'm writing for people who are connected directly. You with Clara, and of course with also therefore with Eleanor, who was a great aunt for you. And in fact, your sister told me, Marion told me that Eleanor, and you should all know that Eleanor was known in the family as, let me get it right, not the crazy Auntie Roxy, but the, I've forgotten it, actually. It's somewhere in the book. An exciting woman abroad was how she was seen. Wow. And of course, your great, that would be your great grandmother, Clara, I think was a wonderful woman also, but many of her letters have not been saved. And I don't know why. I don't know how. And it's a tragedy, in fact, because she wrote regularly. It was not that she didn't write. So there are many mysteries in this kind of work, and that's partly what I enjoy.
Wow. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Very well done. Great presentation. Thank you.
I wanted to ask also, why was it important, do you think, that I mentioned the candy downtown, the candy store downtown that in fact Roxy herself joked about? I think it's mentioned somewhere in the book. Did anyone come across that? Well, she herself, Eleanor, told her granddaughter, Pat Silver, who told me that she was very proud, although also upset, that it was her candy store credits, shopping, lots of candy. Eleanor loved candy and made it herself too. But she had used the credit, her father's credit, too much. And that's why she had to be sent away from the school. And she cooked all kinds of wonderful sounding chocolate things and caramel things and so on. What I would like to just hear, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, we've already been going on a long time. I would like to ask you, is it possible from here in time to look back to people who lived so long ago, who were born 150 years ago, 150, 160 years ago, Sarah and Eleanor? Is it possible for you to let the clothing go away, let the hairstyles go away, and just see the person inside of them? Have you thought about that kind of thing? I feel when I have written these things, I always feel very close to these people because I read their personal letters very often. And of course, I try to be very fair, very careful what I tell about them. And I forget when it is that these things are happening, unless Eleanor suddenly describes a battle that she has seen the boats come back from and they are hurt. Then I am back again in the Russo-Japanese War. But it seems to me that it's so useful to be able to see people and not think about what are they wearing. If I stared at all of you, white jackets, I could have some kind of thing in my head that seemed to say, oh, that's bad, or that's good, or that's beautiful. It doesn't matter. As people, we are all people. I said in one place, and I did decide to include it, that we are all sailors in the ocean of life. I think I said that. We are all people. We're all sailors in the ocean of life. And it doesn't matter what the outside looks like. It depends on what Sarah showed from her heart. And also the difficulties that Roxy posed in the beginning when she was very opinionated. She believed she was very smart, very intelligent, but I think she believed that she knew everything better than everybody else when she was 12, 13. I don't know if some of you were those kinds of guys and girls. I think I was to some degree also. I felt that In school, I knew better than many of the others because I like to read. And one has to sort of drop that and decide that people are people, and we are all, I came up with this little phrase, we are all sailors on the ocean of life. I like that. Do you all want to go home, or do you have some more questions?
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts they'd like? Yes, Don,
I would just, could I go up and,
please, of course.
because I can't ask you to repeat this. Birgitta, it's young John.
Yes, of course. I recognize you, young. I need to explain, young Don. This is Douglas Young. Then I asked permission as soon as we met. Was it allowed if I call him young Don? I realized, of course, he was about my age or a little bit older, perhaps. And so this is young Don.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say, tack the Bible. She didn't hear me.
Let's say it one more time.
Tack the Bible.
Oh, that's Russian. Tell me again what you're saying.
I'm saying, how are you?
Oh,
Tack the.
Мне хорошо, спасибо. I know that young Don studied Russian, and it's not an easy language. Neither is English, by the way. I grew up with Swedish, and English is, I think, to some degree more complex than Russian. Not everybody would agree with me, but certainly to not write ordinary, boring sentences is complicated. And I love English. I also am very fond of Russian, but I love Swedish and I love English perhaps more. So thank you for all our letters, young Don, and for what you just said. We're well at home. Gregory and I are well. I dedicated the book to 5 people. And if you've seen it, you know, I'll just thank them also. Pat and Paul, who were the first people whose home I stayed in when I came the second time in 2015 to Maine, to Berwick. And we really hit it off. And in fact, I feel that I have many friends among you and in this town and the towns around. So I dedicated the book to Pat and Paul, and in Russia to Victor, who is the director of the museum. He's very young to be a director, but he is a dear friend. He's the director of the Museum of History that I have worked in a lot, even before I knew him. And also, so 2 people, and Victor, 4 people altogether, and then to my dear husband, Gregory. They have all supported my work and much of my life. And I see many of you here that I have met, and that you have been kind to me also. It's warm in the heart to know that one day I may be able to come back and perhaps see some of you again. I can't travel now. I have asthma. You can hear my voice is somewhat dark. I used to sing a lot, and I tried to sing a little bit now, but when we had the music on, it's not quite what it was, but one can still sing, even if it's not beautiful.
Thank you, Birgitta, thank you for dedicating the book to us, Birgitta.
Oh, you're there.
We're there.
Well, I didn't see you up on top. Well, how wonderful. How wonderful. How did the graduation ceremony go?
Everything was well. It was great.
It must have been amazing. And happy birthday, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, both of you. How wonderful. I didn't know that they could connect with us. There they are.
Birgitta, will you tell us again the word in Russian for faded or
I can't hear, sorry.
Word that you shared with us the Russian term for something being destiny, for it being fated?
Sudba. Imagine S-U-D, Sud. I'm going to
Sud.
tell you. B-A-H, ba. Okay, we're going to do this now, and don't get crazy and be quiet. Sud,
Sud.
ba.
Sud. Ba. Ba.
Sudba.
Sudba.
Sudba. Once again, Sudba.
Sudba.
Okay, Sudba.
Birgitta, I think that it is Sudba that
No, it's Sudba.
Sudba. Am I saying it right?
S on the last thing, Sudba. If we
Sudba.
do it, we're going to do
Sudba.
it right.
Sudba.
Sudba.
That you have been able to be the steward of these stories, of these letters, and to channel these stories, because you it's not just history that you're telling. It's you approach it from such a beautiful place and a very human place, and it's what makes the book really a delight. But it also makes hearing you tell us why it's important to pay attention to the blue eyes and to who these people are, who they are at their core, and how if they were in the room with us, we would be interested in them. And it is interesting because you make it interesting. And so we very much appreciate you keeping these stories alive, and really these fabulous letters that are now in the Library of Congress, and such an important part of our roots here in Berwick, and we really we have you to thank for all the work you've done, and certainly for this wonderful book and for this talk tonight. And we thank you very much.
Jeremy, thank you all. I'll just mention that, of course, I worked in universities, and in universities one cannot write this kind of thing because it's too personal, too humane, perhaps. And what you said, Jeremy, is exactly what I like to do. I like to, and when I retired, I could write whatever I wanted. So that's why I want to make sure that you all know, if you read the book or if you get your book, everything is true. I didn't make up anything, but I did want facts to be the context. But I also wanted human things. I wanted ordinary stories about ordinary people. These people were not highly different from everybody else in very basic things. They had people who died, they cried, just like anybody else would do 200, 300, 400 years ago. If you care about someone and that person dies, of course you cry, of course your heart hurts. And I wanted to be able to make a story that in what I have written, even parts of letters from Vladivostok, I wanted to make them so that people could connect with Eleanor. The first book really is only about her, and other people are mentioned, Sarah is mentioned, Ted is mentioned, and so on, but it's focused on her and Ted's life in Vladivostok. They were very happy there, although she more than him. He came because of her, thanks to her. And they stayed so that she, in fact, stayed even after Ted had died. And I wanted to take on the personal aspect of that. Why did she, what was it that she found there? And that's hard to think. Lots of people in Russia love that book, and they have met in parks reading from it, but they too cannot say what is it exactly that made her want to stay in that place. And I think partly it was because of the contrasts in the story, in her life there and in the city's story. Wonderful, easy life versus very complicated life. And Jeremy, you have really shown me too what it is that I do. I know what I do, But when you said it, it really warmed my heart. Thank you so much for feeling that and for realizing and taking it in so that you thought about it. And I see all of you here. I know that some of you want to go home, and I will not hold you longer. Write to me if you want. Jeremy, please, you can give my email to everybody if you want. I write with some of you, but if more of you want to write to me, please do. I can tell you, in fact, if you want to write it now, it's my name, my first name and my middle name, Birgitta, B-I-R, not R-I. The Birgitta are French or German, not me. And I'm B-I-R-G-I-T-T-A, and then no space, Maria. My middle name is Maria, M-A-R-I. That was the Virgin Mary. My family, my mother was religious, and my father was an atheist. You can imagine how badly that went, and it did. But they were happy to start with, and I'm glad about that. So Birgitta Maria, no space, 777, no space, @gmail.com. And please write if you want. I always write back, even sometimes, though it might take a little time. But I think that you need to go out. It's probably dark there. It's not dark here yet. But I am so glad to have seen you. And I'm so grateful that you bothered to come here. And those of you who came online, so to say, Bill and Claire and Pat and Paul, how lovely to see you. Beatrice, I don't know, I haven't seen her name, but she's a dear friend also. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.